Session Blood.
Welcome to Session Blood episode 17, everyone. I'm Kieran.
Hey guys, I'm Carol.
And so this is our very first episode being featured on Channel Firewall, which is super exciting. I'm stoked they've supported the game and given us an opportunity to showcase on their site.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we started this, who would have thought that this is what was going to happen? So it's kind of like a bit of a dream come true, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, for our new listeners, we actually started this we didn't have any recording equipment or anything. We just put my phone down in the middle of the table and just sort of freestyled talking about Fab for about an hour. And then we got some good feedback, so I decided to keep it going.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's kind of how the idea for the podcast came about. We just ended up spending so much time just kind of like sitting there chatting about the state of Flesh and Blood, the state of the competitive scene. And one day we decided, hey, let's just record this, and throw it out there. And here we are. So, yeah, thanks to all the listeners who have been with us since day one. It's been really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, one of our favorite things we like to do at the start of every episode is give shout outs to community figures, players, the developers, or all sorts of people. And yeah, I suppose our first shout out, like Carol said, will be to all our listeners who've kind of supported us from the start and given us a bit of a platform to keep throwing out content. So we love you all. Thank you so much.
And thanks to all the players who stuck with the game at the very start, because it tends to be like a rocky terrain when you entering a new trading card game, and it's new, you don't know what's going to happen, and it's just been blowing up.
Yeah, especially with the year we've had with COVID lockdowns and everything. It's it seemed a little bit on not shaky ground, but there was definitely some questions about how the game was doing, would it expand and everything, and I think through the support of all the players, it's just gone on to better and better things all the time. So
Yeah, and yeah, we aim to kind of in this episode kind of go over for those who are just kind of entering into the journey into Flesh and Blood, to kind of give you some tips on how to get started. Um, you know, obviously with COVID and whatnot, not everyone has the luxury of going to their local card store and playing and with an organized play kind of thing. So we have some tips on what to do if you're in a situation where you just want to get together with a bunch of your friends and play some cards at home, or if you can go out, if you want to start your collection, things like that.
yeah, exactly. And we'll probably do a bit of an introduction about ourselves, go through a few of our stories, how we got into Flesh and Blood, all that sort of thing. Maybe a couple of things our old listeners might have heard before, but I'm sure you'll stick with us and all that. So, Carol, I know you had a couple of shout outs you wanted to start the show off with today, so I'll pass it over to you for that.
Yeah, so my first shout out goes to a player who's been on the scene ever since we started, our journey into Flesh and Blood, and that is Simon Austin Wallace, the Saw. He's been there on the scene, kind of giving us tips and his famous critiques here and there, helping us learn the game. So big shout out to you, Simon.
Great character. We love you, Simon.
Yeah. But yeah, I also wanted to give a massive shout out for those new players who are just entering the game, and helping to grow the community. I think it's you made the right call by joining this game. And yeah, we'll talk about our experience a little bit as well, where we went from playing trading card games on and off kind of thing to fully diving into this game, so much so that we started this podcast, we started writing articles, and it's just been a crazy journey.
Yeah, and on that note, I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to all the local game stores around the world that have jumped on board and decided to give Flesh and Blood a chance. Like I said, I think you guys have all made a great decision. And also, on the flip side, I wanted to give a massive shout out, like we've alluded to earlier, to the sort of, the OGs on the scene, like the community who's been there since day one and have just constantly supported the game. And one thing I really like about this community is to me, there's very little sort of elitist attitude or elitism or, sort of taking an arrogant stance or just being disdainful of new players. And I would highly encourage anyone who's diving into the game or giving it a go, feel free to jump on some of the Facebook fan pages, things like that. If you've got any questions about rules, about cards, um, all these players are more than willing to give you a hand and help out.
Yeah, and also if you would like to give a shout out to anyone in your community, your um, some of the friends that play with you, or maybe the local card store that picked up the game, do email us on sessionblood@gmail.com. And also, if you have any questions about the game as well, if you are kind of stuck about, I don't know, whether it's a ruling or you have, a matchup that you're not sure about, do chuck us an email and we'll try and cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll try to get through as many shout outs as we can. We'd probably prioritize the ones if you throw in a question and a shout out, we'll try and bump you up the top of the list. But like Carol said, if you're going to an armory event and you're like, I'm playing warrior and I just can't seem to beat wizard, or like I'm playing ninja and I can't get past guardian, we'll do our best to answer any questions any of you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, talking about, how we got into trading card games is a bit of a long story. Like for me personally, trading card games have been a part of my life for a very long time. When I was 7 years old, my dad bought me some Magic the Gathering cards, and at the time I was like, he always bought me all this stuff that I wasn't quite ready for. Like, got my first computer when I was 5, could barely work that. Got my first bicycle when I was 3. And then yeah, so basically those kind of for me were pretty pictures that got thrown into a shelf. And then when I was about 13, 14, I was like, hey, wait a second, you can actually play with them. And I kind of started, getting into strategy and whatnot. And yeah, and to be honest, it was at high school when I was 13 or 14 that I really jumped onto the game and, found lifelong friends playing at lunchtime, getting together. Just at the time, it was kind of Mirrodin, I guess, for
Yeah, I
Magic
think
the
Meriden
Gathering.
Kamigawa around
For
there.
those of you who do have a background in Magic the Gathering, that was the kind of time that we started playing, which was heaps of fun. And to be honest, like all those people that I've met through cards, I've become lifelong friends, and that's how I met Kieran actually. Um, yeah, so basically one lunchtime, I remember walking past the pools and I see this guy kind of playing Yu-Gi-Oh in a corner, and I just kind of laughed to myself, being like, Yu-Gi-Oh, this stuff, what nonsense, like Magic the Gathering is the game. Um, and then
They
eventually,
slowly dragged me
yeah,
in.
and then eventually I saw the same guy kind of, decided to play Magic, and that's how we became friends. And fun fact, it's like, we've been mates, we've been basically best friends throughout, school.
15, 16 years or so now.
Yeah, and the one fun fact is like we never actually had a same class together at school.
Oh, yeah, we didn't.
Yeah. So yeah, that just kind of shows you the power of trading card games. But fast forward 10 years into the future, kind of thing, and our group of friends still stuck together. We still played cards. You had some success on kind of like national level, I guess, to an extent.
Yeah, we won't talk too much about Magic Nationals.
But
yeah, because I suppose just jumping in for my background, pretty similar to Carol. Like I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and then the scene at my school died up a bit, so I jumped in with these Magic players who, I was kind of the new guy on the block, and the first thing I did is like go online and net deck a Ravager Affinity deck.
The most kind of hated deck there is.
So I was kind of that guy, and yeah, it's pretty funny because our first few experiences when playing some of my best friends to this day, people like Rohan and Mark, and play against Carol. Like I feel at the very start we didn't like each other all that much, but then
That is true. Yeah.
as happens with card games sometimes. But then we picked it up pretty quick, and yeah, so then we played games through high school a bit, then dropped off for a few years.
Yeah, we kind of went off constructed as such, and we would, kind of play on and off, maybe some drafts or sealed things here and there. But one thing that I think we kind of nailed is we decided to do this thing called the Pukunui Pro Tour, where it wasn't my idea. I kind of jumped on a bit later on, but it's just such a brilliant idea where we got 8 players, the exact number of players that you need for a draft. We would find the most scenic, beautiful holiday homes in New Zealand. Go to those, go to that holiday home for a long weekend or an extended weekend, probably 3 or 4 days usually. We would shuttle the blinds,
Shuttle the doors.
close all the doors, and just draft day in day out. Basically, from the moment you wake up to the morning you go to the moment you go to sleep, we would just play cards, and that was it's just some of the highlights of the year, you could say.
Yeah, so the background for the name there is a lot of us, so like myself and Carol and Rohan, Tom, over time we lived at a flat or like a share house on a road called Pukenui Road in New Zealand. So that's where we kind of got the idea for the name of the Pro Tour from. And yeah, so we used to play sort of 5 rounds of either one sealed and 4 drafts or 5 drafts over the course of 2 or 3 days. It was a pretty punishing schedule. Like,
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty casual event. Just hey guys get together to play some cardboard, but it was vicious. Like the level of competition in that. I feel like if anything trained me for Flesh and Blood was those kind of events where it was everyone would fight tooth and nail to win the title, the champion of our pro tour.
yeah, and like you probably think in 5 drafts you can get through that pretty quickly, but we played like fully untimed rounds, so you'd have like you'd have sort of these an hour and a half thrillers, like which went on for a long time. But I still remember one time we were at a place, a holiday home which we call a batch here in New Zealand, and it was actually right next to a beach that was ranked in the top 5 beaches in New Zealand. And we're kind of, we walked into the house and I kind of looked at the beach and I'm like, won't be going there this weekend.
Yeah, look out the window. That's a pretty nice beach, and then just close the window and continue playing.
I took a photo for the gram and said, "Oh yeah, beautiful sunshine and beaches." But
yeah, but kind of how we got into Flesh and Blood is another story. So in 2018, I believe it was, one of our mates kind of let us know. We kind of played the our little Pukenui Pro Tours and whatnot, and then one of my mates asked us like, "Hey, I've heard of this new game that is just being developed. It's a new trading card game. It's made by James White." And we knew James because he organized a lot of the tournaments that we would go to when we were younger. But basically, he said, this is a new game, and they're looking for players to test out the game. And at that point, I was like, wait, new trading card game? What nonsense! I don't want to have anything to do with that.
No way, that is cancelled.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, another year went by. We kind of didn't hear anything about it, and then our mate Tom Penny, who still plays a lot with us and whatnot, he was just adamant about getting us into the game. So Tom would buy boxes on boxes and of Welcome to Wraith, now worth probably ridiculous amounts of money. But he was like, you guys need to learn this game, and as
it pretty much forced us into playing Steel Deck, and so he'd come around and he managed to convince Carol first, and I was hesitant. My first ever experience of Flesh and Blood is I walk into my kitchen. So Carol and I were living at the same flat at the time. I walk into my kitchen. I see Tom and Rohan playing on the kitchen. Oh, sorry, Tom and Carol playing on the kitchen table, and I see equipment, and I'm like, "What's this?" And Tom says, "I start the game and play," and I'm like, "That's stupid. I'm not playing this game."
Yeah. What is all this stuff? Like, what? You draw only 4 cards? This doesn't make any sense.
I'm like, what? So you use all your cards and you draw up 4 cards at the end of a turn. I'm like, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it was really cool because, you kind of sit down and the game was just so intuitive. Like, and I think Tom had he tried his best to pitch the game. He was like, we have, Chris Gehring, who's a great Yu-Gi-Oh player, and Jason Chung, who's, a very, very well-established Magic the Gathering player. Those two minds spent 5 years along with James White trying to develop this game. Like, you guys are going to love it, but, nothing kind of
swayed us in a way.
Yeah.
But then he sort of slowly got us into it. I still think my first Welcome to Wrath sealed game, I played against Tom, and I had some cards that you might be seeing when you play your own sealed decks and drafts coming up soon with Unlimited. So I had a Slogism and Regurgitating Slog in my first hand, and a Goliath Gauntlet. And so I pitched 2 blue cards. I played Slogism, used a Goliath Gauntlet, and played a Regurgitating Slog for like 15 damage with Dominate. And got through 12, and I'm like, this game seems alright.
Yeah, it was really interesting because, like I kind of expected, I didn't know what to expect, but, the game was really intuitive, and obviously Tom kind of knew how to play, so for me particularly, it became kind of like a bit of a goal to, like, as long as I can beat Tom, I'll just, I'll kind of throw in the towel, and that'll be my kind of career with Flesh and Blood. And then the more kind of sealed games we played, the more we realized the depth and complexity of strategy of the game, because it just seemed so simple at first. I just thought, this game's got nothing on other trading card games, and then all of a sudden I was hooked.
Yeah, I was kind of the same. I played that first sealed deck, and I think I played one more sealed deck as well with Tom not too long after. And I remember thinking after the second one, I'm like, I could play limited for this game, but I'm not going to invest in playing another card game. Like, I haven't played card games in ages. This seems like a bit of fun. Then 3 days later, I spent like $350 buying like legendaries. I was like, I'm going to play Ninja. I'm going to get my Mask of Momentum, my Find Owl's Tunic, and all of that. And then from then onwards, we were pretty much all in. We were like, we're doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, Tom told us about, this huge tournament coming up called The Calling, which was, like $10,000 worth of prizes, and we were like, we can do this. We can do this.
Yeah, one of our first tournaments that we went to, Carol and I traveled down in like a minibus type of thing with some other fellow Fab players at the time, down to a city called Palmerston North in New Zealand. So
yeah, which is like 7-8 hour drive.
Yeah,
out of our hometown.
And the minibus was about 7 hours. So we just kind of said to our partners at the time, we're just going away for the weekend. We're driving down 7 hours to play a Flesh and Blood tournament for one day, then we're coming back.
I to be honest, I did not expect that. Like 2 weeks beforehand, I didn't even know what the game was. I mean, I think it was like 2-3 weeks after basically we got introduced to the game. We were on the way in a minivan filled with players that we're great friends with now, but at the time they were pretty much strangers to us, and going to this like small town just to play a card game that we just picked up. It was nuts. I remember thinking like, what am I doing? But I was loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I think they had like 7 or 8 of us in that small sort of motel type of room, whatever it was. Like people on the couches, people in beds everywhere. I believe Alan was with us, Alan Hale, the organised play manager.
Yeah, Alan drove the minivan. Yeah,
shout out to you, Alan. That was cool of you.
Good times. But yeah, it was, and kind of as we, even with The Calling, it was a situation of I didn't want to spend too much money on it, so I thought to myself, I opened 6 packs, and I was lucky enough to open a legendary, which was the Tectonic Plating. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm playing a Guardian.
Don't need a tunic, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, sweet, just bought a bunch of Crippling Crushes and Spinal Crushes and whatnot, and I was set for the tournament. But even with The Calling, it was a matter of I thought to myself, I'll just play this one tournament. I just kind of found out that, my girlfriend was pregnant. So I was like, I can't commit to this stuff.
I was going to say a fun fact. I think you found out the night before or 2 days before or something.
Yeah. It was, I think it was the week before The Calling I found out my girlfriend was pregnant. But I was like, I'm just going to try my best in this tournament. And that would be me done for the with the game. And I just, the more I played the game, the more into it I got.
Fun fact, before The Calling, actually, my main testing partners were Carol, I suppose, because I think we were in the same flat at the time, but also a sort of a player I was told, this guy's pretty good at card games, played a lot of Magic, and he's pretty good at Flesh and Blood. And I was like, oh yeah, so we started playing a bit, and it was none other than the mighty Matt Rogers, the
Yeah,
number one,
methodical Matt.
yeah, the number one ranked player in the world. And I like to think I held my own in those testing sessions.
Yeah, it was funny coming back home from work and just seeing Kieran and Matt grind out games, and the intensity in the air was yeah, something special.
Yeah, because the calling was basically one of our first experiences of playing like a tournament with major prize money in a game that we thought we could do quite well at. Because like we'd played Magic before in New Zealand, but there wasn't really as much prize support for us down here.
Hmm.
And so this one, we'd practice I'd practice like quite a lot in the sort of weeks going up to it. And I remember on the morning it was myself, Carol, and our friends Tom and Rohan. And like I think Tom picked us up, and you could just feel the nerves, feel the tension in the air.
Yeah, definitely. And Kieran came second. I just want to put it out there. The calling came. Kieran made it all the way to the finals, only losing to Sasha. Shout out to Sasha, who now works for LSS. But like that is an outstanding result, and I think we were just all so thrilled and so hooked on the game.
Yeah, it was awesome. All my friends are staying there right till the very end. Because in Swiss, we basically figured out before the tournament you had to go at least 5-2 out of 7 rounds to make the top 8, and then even then you might miss out on breakers.
Yeah.
So I won my first round, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then second round, I was paired up with none other than Matt Rogers and lost a bit of a thriller. And then I just found myself playing sort of 5 sudden death matches almost for the rest of the tournament. So
Yeah.
I was pretty stoked to end up coming second and, losing to a living legend, Sasha.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like summarizes our entrance into the world of Flesh and Blood. We started. The lockdown came. I kind of had a lot of free time, so I started writing a bunch of articles. We started the podcast and whatnot. But I wanted to use this episode to kind of give you the newer players out there who are waiting for Unlimited to come out, waiting to get your hands on the product, a bit of a kind of guide of how you can both learn the game and kind of start assembling your collection to play constructed.
Yeah, and we also just wanted to go through, after a bit of an extensive background, just kind of what we like to usually cover in these podcasts. So, like we have a lot of fun playing Session Blood, and that's kind of like the main part of the game. But Carol and I are both like very competitive players. Like we love playing, we love competing, and so like at the Road to Nationals, Road to Calling, so sort of events. Carol, you've made what, like sort of 7, 8, 9 top 8s?
Yeah, I've top 8'd. I'm pretty sure I top 8'd every event that I went to, except for the calling. But yeah, pretty happy with that.
Yeah, and I'm fairly similar myself. I've sort of top 8'd about 7 or 8 of those qualifier events. I came second at the calling, which was the first sort of major constructed tournament for Flesh and Blood. And I managed to come third at New Zealand Nationals, which was also constructed. For Carol, the timing didn't quite work out because his daughter was born 3 days beforehand.
Yeah, she was due the day after Nationals, but she came a bit early. So yeah, it was just like one of those funny timings where it's just like really the day after the Nationals, but. No complaints there.
Yeah, the thing was, I was kind of scrambling to find out what deck I wanted to play because, we're doing all these podcasts talking about strategy and everything, and unfortunately I ignored my own advice about settling on a deck, so I was trying to like, maybe I'll play Runeblade, maybe I'll play Wizard, maybe I'll play Ninja, and then I just wasn't really happy with anything. So the week sort of the tournament, I just kind of called up Carol and said, because Carol's kind of, he's humble, but he's kind of like the brute master. He's played it for a long time. It's kind of like your favorite class, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's played a ton of games on brutes. I've watched a lot of them. I've played against them. And I just said to Carol, I've decided I'm going to play brute. But we're going to work on the deck because he built like 99% of the deck. So I'm like, all right, we'll work on making like a couple of minor changes to the meta game. and then you just need to teach me everything you know over the next 3 days.
Yeah, which was nice because I could live kind of vicariously through getting all these updates, being like, I won another round, and then I won another round. I was just like, yes, that is my list. Yes, it's doing well.
Yeah, I remember like sort of seeing, anticipating what matchups might be coming up. So I'd get on the phone, I'd be like, Carol, like I'm playing this class next. What do I do?
Yeah.
It was funny because some of them I was just like completely off, and I was like, I cybered out all of these, right? And he's like, no, you leave all of these in. Or another matchups, I'm like, okay, so I've got to leave this, play like 70 cards. He's like, no, what are you talking about? You play 61, you take out everything. I was like, thanks, Carol.
All right, gotta play my game now.
Yeah, so anyway, just moving on to what we usually cover in these podcasts. So, like we say, we like to focus on the competitive side of the game generally. So that's things like tournament results. Previously, we had quite a lot of tournaments in a row, things like Road to Nationals and Nationals, and we had overseas ones in like Taiwan, Malaysia.
Taiwan, yeah.
Now, there may be a slight lull in those events. I know there's, for organised play, it's basically having to wait around COVID restrictions that to settle down. But that's when those start coming out, we'll definitely be focusing on things like that in these episodes. We also like to sort of look at some of the top decks currently on the scene, and we do sort of deck reviews. We do things like matchup breakdowns. So we might look, say, at the top 3 or 4 decks in the metagame at the moment and say, these are the type of matchups you'll usually play against. This is cards you might want to sideboard in, sideboard out. These are the type of strategies you'd like to enlist depending on which deck you're playing against. And also just the occasional metagame update. So, and that kind of comes with more tournaments coming out. Mm-hmm. So if we see a deck sort of dominating 3 or 4 tournaments in a row, we're going to switch the focus onto that and sort of, try and give people an idea of either how to play it or how to beat it.
Yeah, and even just general strategy things. We try to, encourage people to kind of really dive deep into these kind of like little kind of aspects of the game that can really push a game to the next level. So, we did an episode on pitching and sideboarding, and I think that was one of the kind of episodes that you can really like take a deep dive into that particular subject to improve your game. And yeah.
Yeah, and we also like to bring in guests onto the show when we can. So we're fortunate enough that in New Zealand that we've sort of played quite a bit, and we're friends with some of the top players, top ranked players in the world, or players who are either like just have been doing really well at tournaments or won tournaments, or even players who are like particularly good, known to play on a certain class, or just good players in general to discuss aspects of the metagame. We like to bring them in, sort of run it in an interview type format, have a bit of discussion, and kind of pick their brain on what they think about Flesh and Blood, and to share it with everyone else to help the game grow, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess other things we do, I suppose, that might be a little while off, but when new sets come up, we like to kind of look at some of the spoilers when they come out and give our idea about how they might slot into new decks or how it's going to shake up the metagame.
Yeah.
All that kind of thing. And we do have some exciting interviews coming up in the next sort of month to 6 weeks. So we won't name names just yet, but definitely keep an eye on the space.
Yeah, and let's have a look on if you're a new player, on how to best get started into the game. And a lot of people kind of start with the starter decks just to kind of pick up, get an idea of the heroes, of the mechanics, and how everything plays. I do recommend, like, other than draft, probably one of my favorite formats is sealed. So that is, you can do that with once unlimited drops. You can do it with Welcome to Wraith or Arcane Rising, where you open 6 packs and construct a deck out of that, and then verse someone, which is a great way. That's basically how we learned. And you only need 2 players really.
And one thing we kind of encourage as well, as Carol was talking about this to me earlier, is if you've got like a couple of friends who like to play and you're buying boxes, like, don't just crack all those packs at once. I mean, if you got 2 boxes, feel free, crack a box and just open it to have a look at the cards. But we really encourage for the second box, invite a few friends around and say, why don't we open 6 packs each and play a game of sealed? So then you can sort of encourage new players to play, or if you have friends who are buying boxes, you're still opening the same amount of cards, but you're really getting some like
Yeah, some
great
value out of.
experience out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to see, if you see someone just like opening packs just to like find the cards, like that's absolutely fine if you're kind of chasing those cards. But there's a lot of things you can use while opening it, and I think sealed is a great way to learn the game and kind of figure out for yourself how cards rank. In terms of how useful they are in particular classes and whatnot. So I definitely recommend you do that while buying product. And
I
I've
I was just going to
yeah.
say, I believe on that note, you just had an article that was published that goes through a bit of introduction to sealed on for Welcome to Wraith.
Yeah, so if you're getting Welcome to Wraith Unlimited and you're getting some product, I do recommend you play some sealed games. And I did release an article that kind of covers the introduction to the format. So for Welcome to Wraith in particular, how to approach basically the whole format from opening packs to constructing your deck and how to creating that 30 card list and some of the kind of aspects of different cards as well.
Yeah, and just one thing, because I know you just mentioned 30 cards there, and I feel that's one of the differences sometimes between games like Magic the Gathering and Flesh and Blood, for example, is 30 cards is the minimum amount for sealed, but it's not unlike Magic where you pretty much always want to play 40 cards, I'd say, nearly always in draft and
Mm-hmm.
sealed. In Flesh and Blood, sometimes you might want to play 35, 36.
Yeah, I feel like if if you have a really great pool, go for it. I do feel, in particular, in sealed, a lot of the time you kind of end up with those 25 cards that you really want to play, and then
Yeah.
there's those, maybe one, two, three, or even five kind of like filler cards that you kind of need to get your numbers up. But I feel like, yeah, if, for example, you're going for a kind of fatigue strategy, I do recommend putting more cards in, just to kind of run out your opponent, um, be able to run out your opponent out of cards and then fatigue them. Um, but yeah, I do think that sticking to 30 is probably.
Probably right most of the time.
Yeah.
See, this is why he's writing the article, not me.
Yeah, it really depends on your pool, but there is that kind of space for a fatigue. I actually did that with Arcane Rising. I played a sealed, just a one-on-one sealed with my friend, and I ended up playing this fatigue ranger where I knew he was going to play ranger as well, so I knew that um, basically one of us was going to run out of arrows at some point. So just went super defensive, had like a bunch of blues and like 35 cards in my deck, and I ended up fatiguing him.
Yeah. And yeah, so when you're playing sealed as well, it's one of those things where, particularly if you're playing with friends, I mean, often yes, one pool of cards is going to be better than others. So like your guardian cards might be a bit better than your ninja cards, for example. But particularly when you're learning the game, like if two of your pools are relatively even, don't be afraid just to try something new. If you're like, I really want to play ninja, but my guardian cards are better, then I'd say just have a bit of fun with it, particularly when you're learning the game.
Yeah, definitely. And the reason why I'm kind of saying pushing sealed so much is because you're learning the game as you're buying the product. You're collecting the cards. The kind of increasing your collection at the same time. So it's just a good way to start your collection off. And for those of you who are unsure how to approach it, do I just buy a sealed product? Do I just buy, singles? I feel I would recommend getting, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 boxes, so something around there. Maybe a case if you want to have a big collection. But yeah, you have to find that balance between buying sealed product, getting that initial sets of your commons, your rares, maybe some majestics and whatnot, and then kind of finishing off your constructed list by purchasing singles. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, definitely, because we know there's a lot of sort of content out there for all sorts of games on finance, like MTG Finance, Fab Finance, that kind of thing. But we would recommend, yeah, if you're just going to try to build up a collection, but you're not really sure what you want to play. I think everyone has a different budget, so it really does depend where you're coming from. But I'd say, yeah, if you buy anywhere from 2 boxes to a case, I feel that like you'll open probably some decent cards in there. If you buy a
Yeah,
case,
and you'll most likely kind of cover the basics, which is, playsets of commons, playsets of rares, and then even if you get some majestics or some legendaries, even, you can trade for the cards you're
yeah, because
looking for.
there's no guarantees, but generally, if you buy a case, there's a pretty high chance you'll get at least one legendary, and that might be you might be coming in from a space, so I don't really know what class to play, but like Carol's experience, you open a Mask of Momentum, you decide, well, I've got the legendary, why don't I play Ninja?
Hmm.
And yeah, that was one thing we were talking about before, before we started recording today, about how would we approach the game right now as a new player if we didn't have any cards.
Hmm.
And I think it definitely differs between if you're kind of more of an investor slash collector or more just looking to play the game.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you are someone who really enjoys, collecting cards and you want to have the best of everything, then like yes, by all means, you could look at getting some of those cold foil legendaries from like the original sets, which are like very expensive. At the moment, they've kind of gone up a lot in price, or even getting sealed products, for the alpha print stuff. But if you're
Yeah,
just look,
I wouldn't kind of buy the alpha print just to open it and to start your collection kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, one thing I was thinking that if you wanted to get, say, one or two like feature cards from the early sets, the cold foils, um, I'm not sure I'd 100% recommend, like, if you've just seen something and saying, I kind of like the look of Ninja, I'm going to buy a cold foil Mask of Momentum because I want to play it for my Ninja deck.
Hmm.
Because I think the great thing about Fab is all the classes are so fun that you play one class, you switch to another, and then you decide you want to, completely 180 and play something else.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you're wanting like an iconic cold foil from the opening set, then maybe one of the generics, something like Findel's Tunic or Arcanite Skullcap, which will probably stand the test of time and be around for a while.
Yeah, and it just fits into so many classes.
Yeah, a card like Findale Spring Tunic, for example, it goes in so many decks at the moment that, if you're on that angle that I'd like something to invest in that I can also play with, that might be a
Hmm.
good option. But generally, if you're just looking to play the game, then just buy unlimited. Like
Yeah.
you can get all the products, you can play sealed, like we've been going on and on about.
Hmm.
You can get all these cards sort of significantly cheaper, and just really being able to like jumpstart your way into the game. Yeah. So we just wanted to go through like one example of the way you could go about uh, building a deck for relatively cheap without having to, buy all the very best cards and still have it be reasonably competitive.
Hmm.
So one example we thought would be good is Ninja. I feel Ninja historically has been quite a popular class.
Hmm.
You can do a lot of cool stuff with your combo lines and all that sort of thing. And so say you buy your case of Welcome to Wraith and you open a Mask of Momentum and you're thinking, where do I go from here? Like, I don't have the tunic, I don't have a few other things. But for Ninja, there's actually a lot of options because of the combo lines that you can play it without needing sort of all the best Majestics and Super Rares.
Yeah, and that's kind of true for most of the classes. Is that you don't have to play all the expensive cards. There, as a kind of like start to the game, it's fine to as Kieran was saying with Ninja, for example, if you have that Mask of Momentum, or if you want to get into Ninja, you have a few Majestics. It's absolutely fine to go for something like the leg tap line, where the line itself is, in terms of cost, is really cheap, but it's actually really effective. So it's fine to play, cards like Ravenous Rabble or Nimbleism and Nimble Strike, Plunder Run. Some of these cards that actually are very aggressive and are, very good in the game, but don't cost you a fortune as well.
Absolutely, because Ninja's probably a particularly good example because, like, say you open that Mask of Momentum, things like both your weapons are commons. Like the Breaking Scales is a common you can use.
Hmm.
Snapdragon Scalers, another common equipment that's extremely powerful in Ninja.
Yeah, and you can even run the vest. Yeah.
Yeah, or you could use hardened cross traps. Actually, quite a good one sometimes in Ninja. Or
Hmm.
Vest of the First Fist. These are just good examples of cards you can use if you don't have that Spring Tunic, but you still want a fairly competitive deck.
Hmm.
And like Carol was saying, ones like the Leg Tap line, for example. So Leg Tap goes into Rising Knee Thrust, which then goes into Blackout Kick or Hurricane Technique. Hurricane Technique's are super rare. You don't even necessarily need to play that.
Hmm.
So you could build, and then you could run things like the Head Jab line, which is also a common. So Head Jab, open the center, both commons. And then the
Hmm.
final bit of that is Fluster Fist, which is just a simple rare. Probably
Hmm.
costs, I don't know, a couple of bucks or so.
Hmm.
Um, so that way, I mean, there are certain cards that would be nice to have things like Ancestral Empowerment, which is majestic, which is actually just kind of extremely strong across
Hmm.
the board. Um, I mean, but if you don't have that, again, you could replace it with something like Lunging Press, which is a common card from like the IRA Learn to Play decks, I believe.
Yeah,
Which
yeah, and yeah, I feel like um, cards like Art of War, Command and Conquer, and Light and Strike, those kind of money majestics are not actually necessarily needed, and I think we've seen a trend even in the very kind of top competitive play from people moving away from those cards because of kind of better alternatives for what their strategy is.
yeah, because I mean, uh, sort of. I kind of agree with that. Like, I mean, I think in high level play, you'll still see like a spot for cards like Enlightened Strike. I mean, Art of War, not necessarily. Like, there might be certain decks that run it and certain ones that don't.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, cards like Enlightened Strike, Art of War, Command and Conquer, these are all like nice cards to have in certain builds if you have them. But it
Hmm.
doesn't mean you can't sort of go to a local event and do well without them. So like the core cards in the deck, things like Scar for a Scar, for example, cards like Snatch, cards like Razor Reflex. These are largely either common or rare cards. And the thing about Flesh and Blood is like the rare cards are usually like fairly inexpensive.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the foil versions might cost a bit more, but even like the chase rare cards aren't like crazy expensive.
Hmm.
That's usually the realm of like Majestic and above. So you could easily build a ninja list of 70-ish cards that you could take to a local tournament um, for. I probably can't cite an exact price, but basically it's not going to break the bank. Like if you crack the
Hmm.
legendary, you
And
could
even, I mean, the unlimited legendaries you're looking at probably maybe around that $100 mark or something.
yeah somewhere in maybe 100 range somewhere around there at the
Hmm.
moment. But the point being that you might even look up a deck online, one of the on fabtcg.com, one of the decks that have won a tournament, and you're looking at it and going like, this deck looks reasonably cheap apart from like the three Enlightened Strikes and the three Command and Conquers and things like that,
Hmm.
and you can play alternatives of those without it completely nullifying your deck. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, so like we said, in Ninja, you can just basically find a whole bunch. You can choose one or two combo lines that are largely common. You can choose a whole bunch of like generic red cards, things that are efficiently costed that have go again, like Nimble Strike, Nimbleism, Scar for a Scar, things we've mentioned like that, and put those all together. Because in Flesh and Blood, like the power of the deck often comes from the hero ability. So the hero you're playing has an inherent hero ability that's very strong, and for some classes the legendaries are a bit more impactful than others.
Hmm.
So for ninja, you do really want that legendary to be able to threaten that card draw if you hit your third attack each turn.
Hmm.
But aside from that, you can really chop and change a lot of things
Yeah,
without
I
it.
mean, I feel like the hero ability and the weapons, that's where a lot of the kind of uniqueness and power of a class comes from. Um, and also just, as long as you have quite a streamlined strategy, I feel like you can make it work with commons and rares quite easily.
Yeah, exactly. And like, there's a format that people might have heard of called Blitz as well, which is where you start with a 40 card deck, and you start on usually 20 life. It depends on which hero you're playing.
Hmm.
But the Welcome to Wraith heroes will start on 20 life,
Hmm.
and you can have up to 11 spaces for equipment and weapons. And that's actually quite a good way to learn how to play a deck as well.
Hmm.
You can play a lot of games very quickly, kind of figure out what class you like. Obviously, it's a bit different than Classic Constructed, but at the same time, I thought of that because we have a friend of ours who plays now in New Zealand, He went to his local armory recently and played with. His equipment was just 4 Iron Rod equipments, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So he had all of his equipments were basically just common equipments. Um, I think he had like 1 or 2 majestic rares in his entire deck,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty sure he still went like 2-1 or 3-1 at his tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of like not a game where, at least in the introductory phases, where you have to be like, I can't play unless I get every single card from this deck 1-for-1. Like
Yeah,
you can,
definitely.
like if you're practicing quite a lot, you're doing quite well. Like that's gonna put you in a lot better stead than
Yeah.
if you don't play at all and just buy all the
I think
cards.
all in all, I've always kind of had this mantra about Flesh and Blood that a good player with with a bad deck is still better than a bad player with a good deck.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, particularly in one of the strengths of the game is it really rewards sort of skill and reps, like playing a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
Because unlike other games where don't want to hate on Magic too much, but the dreaded sort of mana screw where you draw 1 land for 5 turns, or you draw 6 lands in a row, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
In Flesh and Blood, you cycle through your deck so many times because the cards you pitch go on the bottom of your deck, and you're drawing 4 cards every turn. So it really gives you an opportunity. If you play a lot of games, you get used to all these different situations. You start to pick up when someone's sort of bluffing an attack reaction, a defense reaction, when you might be able to throw through a critical hit, things like that. And you do very well to just start playing games rather than waiting until you've got every card in your deck. Like it's
Yeah, and I hope this kind of gives you guys some kind of an idea of how to get started. How to kind of create those first constructed lists. Maybe for Blitz, maybe for Classic constructed. And yeah, we will be releasing a lot of kind of content to back that up, whether it's from, kind of giving you guides on the sealed format or card rankings, things like that. So there's definitely a lot of kind of, tips and tricks that we've got on the pipeline for the players who are just getting started.
Yeah, because I do have a card ranking article coming out probably sometime this week, I think, on Welcome to Wraith Sealed. And, feel free to use that as like kind of a rough guide when trying to build your decks. Don't feel compelled to sort of follow it to the letter, but just to give you an idea of what cards might be pretty good in some decks. And yeah, I mean, we've if you enjoy this content and you want to go back and have a listen to some of our previous podcasts and videos, that sort of thing, we've got them up on Spotify and YouTube. Some of those go sort of quite in depth. They're sort of like you might be listening and we rattle off sort of 6 or 7 cards in a row and you're thinking like, wait, what are they talking about? And so we wanted to start things off kind of a bit more grounded in getting into the game. In a future podcast, like we say, we'll probably be going a little bit deeper into particular decks and gameplay and strategy and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and if you're looking to, I guess, purchase any product from Channel Fireball and you want to support us, we've got an affiliate code that's just Session Blood as one word, and yeah,
that'd be great. If you enjoy our content and want to support us going forward, feel free to use that. That would be cool.
Yeah, and so I guess in the future episodes we have planned kind of like a overview of each class where we really kind of delve in and focus on each class one by one, hoping to get kind of the top minds in Flesh and Blood kind of giving their opinions on the class and how to play it.
Yeah, and we also plan to do sort of gameplay videos as well, where either Carol or I play a certain deck against each other, or we might bring a guest in and do some commentary, that sort of thing. And yeah, but the idea behind what Carol was talking about earlier is we'd like to do going forward, some deep dive analysis into certain classes, or eventually all of them, just to try help people out with, if they decide to play a certain class or they're unsure, you're unsure about what you want to play. We hope to give you like a really good grounding in not only sort of the basics of the class, but sort of some high-level plays and a guide to how to approach certain matchups, what cards are good against what classes, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's it from us this week. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and To all our new listeners, we hope you enjoyed what you heard.
Thanks, guys.